The views expressed on this program are those of the producers and individuals appearing on this program and do not necessarily reflect the views of the Sun Prairie Media Center staff, its video service providers, or the staff and elected officials of the City of Sun Prairie.
Hey everyone, this is Rose Daly, the City Sustainability Coordinator of Sun Prairie, and you're listening to the Sustainable Sun Prairie Podcast, the show that aspires to educate, empower, and engage our listeners in all aspects of sustainability. Whether you are a seasoned sustainability enthusiast or just beginning your sustainability journey, each episode will have something new and exciting for everyone. Let's begin the conversation for a greener community. Welcome back to Sustainable Sun Prairie. I'm joined again by BJ Byers for part 2 of this episode. If you missed part 1 of this conversation, go check that out first. This episode picks up right where we left off. Today in part 2, we'll dive deeper into conservation and what it takes to protect special places forever. Let's jump right back in. All right, so now that we've kind of discussed the benefits of nature and ways we can spend more time in nature, I want to shift gears and talk a bit more about your work and land management in general. Because if we're not conserving land, then where are we supposed to spend our time outside besides, near our homes? So off air, you had shared with me that Groundswell's other mission is protecting special places forever. I love this mission and the way it's worded. Can you tell me more about this?
Yeah, you can have a long mission statement that can get a little confusing. Ours is we protect special places forever. It's pretty simple. It's to the point. You kind of get what we're saying. We know the value of having these places, these outdoor green spaces that we can visit. We know how crucial that is for our well-being, like we said earlier, and for our happiness. And there's only so much land on Earth, and we are not an anti-development organization by any means. We need development, we need affordable housing, we need hospitals, we need all of that stuff. But there are some places that are absolutely worth protecting, and if we don't do it now, they could be lost forever. So sometimes we will buy land, sometimes we will work with landowners to help them conserve their land. And then on those properties, we do restoration too. So we're not just owning properties, but we're actually restoring the land, removing the invasive species, and planting the native plants that create more diversity. And
That's awesome. How do you decide what land is worth conserving? And I feel kind of weird saying that. I feel like a lot of land is worth conserving because it's habitat for wildlife. But what is worth conserving to your organization, and what considerations come into play?
Yeah, that's tough. So we're a relatively small organization. We actually just hired 2 more people, so we're up to 11. This is definitely the largest the organization has ever been. And I think all of us would argue that all land is worth protecting, right? That is kind of a charged word, and it makes it seem like if some land is worth protecting, then other parcels of land it's not worth our time. When we're purchasing land, there's a lot of negotiation, there's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of staff time. It's a large undertaking to buy any piece of land. And so because we don't have the largest staff and we only have so many hours in a day, we are trying to be more strategic than ever with the lands that we try to protect as an organization. You might have a landowner who has 3 acres of their property, and maybe there's a 150, 200-year-old oak tree on it, in a prairie that their grandparents planted. And how special is that? That's wonderful. And if I was that landowner, and maybe I was getting a little bit older, and I didn't have any kids that wanted to inherit the land, and I was nervous that if I sold that property, that maybe it might get bulldozed over, and maybe a condo or a grocery store or something would just go right in its place. That's kind of a scary thing to think about. So you could argue, all land is worth protecting, but from our organization's perspective, there are maybe other groups that can help you with your small piece of land, but we are going to be more strategic in that we are looking for larger pieces that maybe have more conservation values to them.
Okay.
So conservation values can be a scenic value. It can be a water quality value. Maybe there's a creek that goes through it. Maybe it's an important piece within a watershed where a lot of water drains through that property. And by protecting it and maybe doing some restoration, you could really drastically improve the water quality in that area. So we try to get the most bang for our buck, if that makes sense. Like, we're not going to take on any project, even though we find value in just about all of them. But with limited staff, we got to be more strategic, and so we're trying to get the biggest, best projects that we can, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. Do you ever consider maybe the species that are living there? Like, is that ever a factor? Like, hey, there's a rare or endangered species that has habitat here, therefore we should protect it, if it's like a big enough piece of land?
Yeah, and it's not just size, but I will say, like, you know, a 10-acre parcel versus a 250-acre parcel. It's essentially going to be the same amount of work. So,
okay.
And if we're only able to do like maybe 5 or 6 projects a year, like, we really want to maximize our efforts. But that helps a lot it helps with the decision-making process a lot if there's a endangered species, be it a bug or a plant or an animal or whatever, like, absolutely. And that helps from a funding perspective too, because there are other organizations they're like, oh, you have this endangered bumblebee or whatever on your property, and it's like, yeah, we want to donate money to help see that area protected. So
I see.
The more of that kind of stuff you can get on a property, the better. So maybe it's a rare or endangered ecosystem type, maybe it's a particular species. All of that really helps.
That's super interesting. And how do you determine if the species is there? Will someone else tell you it's there, or do you guys do your own study just to kind of figure out what wildlife lives there?
Yeah, it's site specific. So sometimes if you're working with a landowner, we work with a lot of landowners. A lot of them know a lot about their land and care a lot about their land. And a lot of them, like you and I, take notes about the things that we see when we're out and about. Some people invite university professionals out to do surveys of some sort. And a lot of times we will have like a list of, oh my goodness, there's a known population of ornate box turtles on this property. Or there's slender glass lizards on this property. Rusty patch bumblebees. Like, a lot of times we'll know ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think it's rare that we go out and specifically look for them, but we do that as well. We'll go out and do that as well, because before we purchase any property, we're definitely we want to walk every corner of it, and we're not necessarily inventorying everything on there, but we're doing an assessment of the entire property. So, you know, depending on the time of year that you go out in February, good luck finding a bumblebee, you know? So
yeah,
there's a lot of variables at play, but yeah.
That's really cool. And I love just like the connection you see between the landowners and their land. It goes back to our point of, once you really study your surroundings and you become more familiar with them, you have that greater desire to protect them, because you see all the beautiful animals that have made their homes there.
Right.
And how that all could be destroyed if someone came through to develop the land. Yep.
And we work with some of the best landowners, and they are the most passionate people, especially about their land, and they have the most knowledge of it, their most emotional attachment to it. So it's wonderful seeing that. And I don't know. Yeah, it's nice.
That's so cool. I love that. And that probably like warms your heart during your workday as you meet these landowners and talk to them.
Yeah. On many different occasions, we've had landowners just break down in tears, and it's just because they're so like emotional about their property, and it's not because they don't want to sell it or they don't want to put a conservation easement on. These are willing. They came to us. They want to do this. They're just, you can tell maybe their great-great-grandparents bought the land a long time ago, and it's like they're just so passionate about it. There's nobody that knows more about their property than them. So those are some of the best landowners you can work with, because they understand the benefits of being outside in nature, and they know what their land has to offer.
That's amazing.
Yep.
So let's say you're working with a landowner and you decide that the land is worth conserving. So Groundswell acquires the land, and then what happens next?
Yeah, so we've got a long process that I won't go through that involves committees and people voting on things. And, it's not just one of us says, hey, this would be a great property to buy, let's do it, and then we do it. There's a long list of things that we need to go through. And if it doesn't get voted on and the majority says we can't take this project on, then we don't. But when we do, obviously there's a lot of paperwork and boring stuff that goes into that. But afterwards, it depends on what the purpose of the property is for. Groundswell Conservancy does not, because we're such a small organization, we don't like to own a lot of land, because we know the importance of actually managing the land. And if it's me and one other employee, about half of his time is spent doing land management. So 1.5 people can't adequately manage thousands of acres of land.
Yeah, that sounds very difficult.
At least not in the way that it should be managed. So we try to manage as much as we can handle. And then mostly what we're doing is we're working with other organizations like the Wisconsin DNR, and we're looking at their priority areas that they've created. And a lot of the land that we're trying to buy is with the intention of donating it to the DNR to add to their existing wildlife areas. So if you think of the landscape as a puzzle, sometimes the DNR has these big areas, but they're missing chunks, maybe around the outside or the perimeter, or maybe a connecting piece that would connect this large chunk with that large chunk. We're really good at writing grants and buying properties. The DNR has a lot more. They're good at it too, but there are some issues, and we are just really good at buying land. So maybe get rid of that part. I'll start that over. So we are buying the land, and then we are donating it to the DNR so that it can get added to their management, right? So if they're going to do a prescribed fire, now they don't have to do a prescribed fire around this little chunk of privately owned land. Now they can just do their prescribed fire through it. Okay.
And it's better for them to manage it because they just have way more staff than Groundswell does.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. That's the simple way to put it. They have a lot more people, more funding, and they can manage it a lot better than we could. So we work it's a partnership for sure. And we do that with other organizations too. The DNR just is one that sticks out. We work with them very closely.
Okay. Very cool. So off air, you had mentioned that Groundswell works with conservation easements. Could you define what that is?
Yeah, so if you were to look it up online, you'd probably get a lot of jargon and a lot of confusing language about what a conservation easement is. And to sum it up pretty simply, it's when an organization like Groundswell Conservancy, we basically buy the development rights of that property. So it's a legal document. It gets tied to that property. It's recorded on the deed. It shows that there is a conservation easement. And usually with the easement, there's this long document that has, not all of them are the same either. They have different, it's based on, from property to property. It's a list of kind of restrictions of what can and can't happen on the property. So maybe you put a conservation easement on part of your property, and that means in this area, or maybe there's like a class 1 trout stream going through it, or there's something that's significant ecologically. You would want to put a conservation easement on that to prevent a subdivision, or a parking lot or something going up on that. And so organizations like mine will pay to buy the conservation easement, or they can be donated from the landowner, depending.
Okay.
That helps us a lot when they are donated. But again, these landowners they bought their land, and most people, when they sell their land, they want to get a little bit of a return on it.
Yeah.
But you'd be surprised. We get people that, several hundred acres, and they just put a conservation easement on it at no cost, and it's like, are you kidding me? That's
So
incredible.
cool. Again, my faith has been restored in humanity.
Right. And these easements last forever. So that's the forever part of what with Groundswell. That document stays with that parcel of land forever.
So there's no renewal process, or you have to review it again in 5 years?
No.
Okay.
I think with some, you'd have to look into it, but maybe with some other organizations, they have different rules and guidelines. I know they have a thing called a sunset clause, where it's after 20 years or after 30 years, we'll revisit and see what the landscape looks like at that point, and maybe renew it. But right now we don't do that. All of our conservation easements are in perpetuity, is what we say. It's perpetual. They last forever. So the next landowner can come along, say, I really like this property. I want to buy it. It's going to be at a reduced cost because there's these restrictions on it. So it's a cheaper property. But it comes with the restrictions.
Okay.
There's certain things that they can and can't do with it. So like I said, from landowner to landowner, it follows the property. So
I love that.
yeah.
And I love that there's not a buyout price. We'll conserve it until someone offers us the right price.
Oh my gosh, yeah. That would not be good. Yeah, that is benefiting the wealthy for sure.
Yeah.
And
good.
land belongs to all of us.
It does. Well, you guys are doing really good work.
Mm-hmm.
How many conservation easements are owned or managed by Groundswell?
That changes regularly, but I would say we're in the ballpark of about 100. They vary in size. Close to half of them are agricultural conservation easements or agricultural easements. So it's farmland. We're protecting prime farmland soils, preventing development in certain areas, preventing intermittent streams that may go through the farms. We do a lot of work in Black Earth Creek, where there's farming all along Black Earth Creek, and it's important to conserve these farms. So half of them are agricultural, and about the other half are actual conservation easements for these properties are more wild. Maybe they have a remnant prairie or an oak savanna, or maybe it's all wetland. A lot of the properties are just all wetland. So they're not usually farming in that instance. So we've got a mix of about 50-50 agricultural and more natural easements.
Okay. And I guess this makes me think that not all conservation easements are open to the public.
Right. Yeah, and at least if you're looking at a Groundswell Conservancy easement, you can see it on our website. We have a project map which shows you all of the project boundaries on a satellite image, and you can click on it and it'll say if it's open to the public or not. But because a lot of these are privately owned and these landowners put the conservation easement on their property, all that does is it's preventing certain things from happening to that land in the future. I think a lot of people think that if it's an easement, then that's a public right that you now get to access that. And there's public easements like that. There's, fishing easements where you can walk along the creeks and stuff like that. But a lot of our easements are still privately owned and probably will be public or privately owned forever. So definitely check before going on land, because you might be trespassing.
Okay, that is really good to know.
Yep.
And I think that it's really important to have some conservation easements that are strictly just for the wildlife without human interaction, because sometimes we mess things up when we come through.
A lot of times, yep.
Yeah.
So it's good to have, some areas that aren't. And that's not to say in the future they will never be open to the public. Sometimes that happens too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you get a really great landowner who's just like, I would love to see this portion of my property be a part of the Ice Age Trail.
Yeah.
It would be the perfect spot.
Right.
And they'll work with another nonprofit like the Ice Age Trail and donate some land to them and open it to the public. So you never know. Just because it's private now doesn't mean it'll be private forever. So.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yep.
So earlier you had mentioned the example of the landowner who has maybe 3 acres of prairie that their great-grandparents bought years ago, and that land's really important to them, and they may call you up and ask if they can have a conservation easement on that property. I'm just curious, how often do you receive phone calls like this?
Oh boy, I was just talking about this week. I'm not in the office a lot, so I don't field a lot of the phone calls, but I have heard from our staff that it's about 1 a week.
Wow.
About one a week. And I think that's for both buying land and for easements, so it's a mixture of the two. But about 1 a week. And if we're doing, it depends. Some years the turnover is very fast, and we can do a lot of easements and buy a lot of land and donate it to the DNR. And sometimes we have projects that sometimes take 5, 6, 7 years. So to get a project inquiry each week, it really reiterates the fact that, like, we need to be super strategic with the projects that we take on. We would love to take on every single person's property project and just protect it forever. But realistically, we just can't do that. But there are other nonprofits. We're not the only one. Groundswell Conservancy is just one of many in the land trust community. So depending on where you live, find the local land trust near you and see if they can help out.
Okay, very cool. To close out the episode, I want to talk a bit more about some of Groundswell's work in action. Would you be willing to walk us through one of your most successful land management projects and maybe sharing the top benefits that came out of that project?
Yeah, sure. Oh boy, I feel like since I'm in Sun Prairie, I need to mention Patrick Marsh. I'm sure there are some Patrick Marsh listeners in here that probably volunteer with me. Shout out to those people. Patrick Marsh is great. We've been doing a lot of work. We've got oak savanna. We've got agricultural fields that we've planted to prairie. 4 years ago, we worked with the middle school there and got, I think, over 300 middle schoolers out to help us plant 25 acres of prairie right next to their school, like immediately adjacent to their school. And it was chaos. I think it was in January, so it was really cold, and there was like some kids in like t-shirts, and we're like, "What are you doing?" And we're just out there with paper bags, hand tossing seed throughout 25 acres.
Wow!
And an acre is roughly the same size as a full-size football field. So 25 of those next to each other, like that was incredible. For Patrick Marsh, that's probably. I'm gonna talk about 2 projects if that's okay.
Go for it.
I feel like I couldn't abandon Patrick Marsh. So yeah, we do a lot of great work there, and the support from the community that we get is amazing. My outdoor volunteers, shout out. But I think to change topic over to our other preserve, Westport Prairie near Wanakee. That place is amazing, just like Patrick Marsh. Right in the very middle, it's about 220 plus acres. And most of it is in agriculture. We bought all of this agricultural land with the intention of planting it all back to what it once was, which was part of the Empire Prairie.
Oh, cool.
The Empire Prairie was this prairie that was like, I think there are estimates of it being over 150,000, 200,000 acres, covering parts of northern Dane and southern Columbia counties. Like, this was a massive prairie. And we have remnants of that prairie. There, if you go to certain parts within Dane County, you can find these. They're usually steep, they're usually rocky, places where you can't farm. It's incredible that we have these relics, because if we didn't have these steep, rocky places, they would have just been plowed over and we would have never known, what would have been there.
Yeah.
But because they're not easily farmed and it's not easy to put a house on top of a rocky hill like that, we have a glimpse into the past. And so what we're trying to do is we're collecting a bunch of seed from these remnant prairies, and we're planting the 200 acres or so of agricultural fields that we have purchased over the last 15 or so years. we're planting it all back to prairie. So we're making an enormous public wildlife area that's going to have some trails going through it. You know, right now there's a kiosk. There's not many trails. We're still in the process of planting it all. Because we're doing it by hand. It takes a long time.
Yeah.
But I think within the next 6 or 7 years, it'll all be planted. And that there is like, that is an accomplishment. I am super proud of that property and the history that's gone, the history that comes with it. Some of the landowners that helped make the purchases possible came out recently and talked about what they did out there as kids, and it's so amazing. And they love what we're doing. You would think if you bought a ton of land from a farmer and said, I'm going to plant it all to prairie, they might be like, oh boy, that's not. But they're super on board with it, and it's great to see. So I think they understand the value of getting people outside. So like I said, it's open to the public. So
that's so cool.
Yeah.
And I think what I really like is that the seeds you're using to plant the prairie are coming from the remnant areas. Because you guys probably could have like bought bulk seeds somewhere, but it probably wouldn't have been the same as gathering the local seeds that are produced in the remnant parts of the prairie.
Right. And that's you. So there's not a lot of organizations that are doing that because of how restrictive it can be. And because we're limited with just a few, remnant prairies, you don't want to overexhaust the resource.
Oh, yeah.
You don't want to collect all the seed every single year. And you want some diversity. So we're planting 5 acres or so, let it grow. Now we have 5 more acres to collect from.
Oh, yeah.
And the DNR helps us. They donate some seed, too, from some remnant prairies that they collect from. Southern Wisconsin Bird Alliance, formerly Madison Audubon Society. They also donate some seed to us from remnant prairies where they know the genetic history of the seeds. So, but you would be surprised too, though. Prairie seed is not cheap.
Yeah.
Buying it would be really expensive, but that's not why we're not buying it. That's we're doing it because we want to restore the Empire Prairie.
Right.
To a small extent.
That's so cool. And I love the name of the prairie, Empire Prairie.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's so large. This is going to be so cool. And I'm excited to see all the wildlife that's going to come back to habitate that area. It's going to be so cool.
Yeah.
I will be out there so I live far away, but when I move out here, I'm going to come volunteer and help you guys.
Oh, you totally should.
Yeah. It just sounds like such a cool experience. And then you can check that box of getting your hour or 2 in nature for the week.
Yeah. And you can, it's going to a good cause. You're helping me.
Getting your exercise. Love it.
And we do stuff year round too. Every single month I'm outside with my volunteers, from cutting invasive brush to pulling garlic mustard, which you probably have heard. A lot of people do that. Sometimes picking up trash. There's seed collection. And then every January we plant prairie. So come out with us. I think this last January we had over 40 people come out, and we were all just walking through a harvested soybean field, just tossing prairie seed on the ground. It was so fun. And then we wrapped it up with some hot chocolate and some Kringle. It was great.
I love that. That sounds like the perfect day.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, is there anything else you would like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, like Rose said, come out, volunteer if you want. Go to our website, groundswellconservancy.org. We've got an outdoor volunteering page. You can put your email in there, and I'll send you a once-a-month email to let you know what sort of opportunities are available. Yeah.
And for people not living in Dane County, do you recommend they reach out to their local land trust?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, we're one of many. There are so many organizations that do such good work, and yeah, we just cover Dane County and some of the surrounding counties. So for sure, Google the county that you live in or the city and type in land trust or conservancy, and I guarantee you'll find someone that you can reach out to do some volunteer work, get outside, do your community engagement, and also just get outside.
Yep, agreed. Yeah, schedule in that outdoor time, and remember, 120 minutes and more will bring you like peak happiness.
Peak happiness.
You'll plateau at 3 to 5 hours. So
yeah.
if you love science, keep that in mind when you're outside. All right. Well, BJ, thank you so much for your time today. This has been such a delightful conversation. And I appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom and knowledge with us about nature and land conservation.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. Thank you for listening to Sustainable Sun Prairie with your host, Rose Daly. I hope you enjoyed this episode and uncovered something new about sustainability. As always, you can subscribe to our podcast and listen anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, and you can listen live on 103.5 FM The Sun, WLSP-LP, and on demand on the Sun Prairie Media Center app. For links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as our contact info, please visit the show notes. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.